Earlier, you talked about the spiking of blood sugar and the glycation and the problems that brings. This gets me thinking about controlling blood sugar spikes with this new natural sweetener. I shouldn't say new, but something that's really blowing up in the natural health world, allulose. How do you feel about that for controlling blood sugar and controlling appetite as a GLP-1 agonist? And then we'll flip into the drugs that are being used in that realm as well.
Allulose, wonderful sweetener. I know of no ill effect. It may even actually amplify loss of subcutaneous fat. There are three compartments of fat. There's subcutaneous beneath the skin. So people with big buttocks or thighs, that's mostly subcutaneous. Then there's abdominal visceral fat. That's the fat encircles the abdominal organs, a much more problematic form of fat because it causes insulin resistance and inflammation. And then there's this recently recognized process called ectopic fat. That's fat in other organs where they're not supposed to be, like fat surrounding the heart, epicardial fat or pericardial fat. There's fat in the pancreas that can kill off your insulin producing cells, the beta cells. There's fat in your kidneys, which can give you kidney disease and hypertension. There's fat in your joints, like hips and knees. And when that happens, it accelerates the breakdown of your cartilage. So ectopic fat, very, very bad. Those are three kinds of fat. Allulose seems to have this peculiar ability to specifically target subcutaneous fat. Don't know why. So it's a great sweetener, as is monk fruit. Stevia is pretty good. Now here's something to bear in mind for your listeners. When you go wheat and grain free, people say, I have a sweet tooth. I say, no, you have a wheat tooth. I say that because it's the gliadin protein in wheat and related proteins in other grains like seclin and rye and hordein and barley and zein and corn that upon digestion form opioids. These are 4 or 5 amino, kind of like collagen, but these are 4 or 5 amino acids along different structure. And they're resistant to human digestion and they cross into the brain where they have opioid effects. But they don't make you high. They stimulate appetite. So people who consume grains tend to have a much more of a sweet tooth. Also, another driver of sweet tooth is fungal overgrowth in the colon and or in the small intestine. It's the weirdest thing. Fungi love sugar. That's why diabetics who have high sugar levels in their skin, in their saliva, in their urine, and they're everywhere, typically have fungal infestation everywhere. Skin, groin, under the breasts, in the hair, in the ears, because they're sugary, and fungi love sugar. But somehow fungi have evolved to produce some metabolite, no one knows what metabolite, that sends a signal to your brain to eat more sugar. So they somehow have evolved to produce a metabolite to direct your eating behavior. So if you go wheat and grain free and then cultivate microbes like rotari and get rid and also address the fungal overgrowth, you start to recognize you have magnificent control over appetite, and the desire for sweetness almost goes away entirely. So in the early days of Wheat Belly, for instance, I had all these recipes for cornbreads and cheesecake and cookies and pies. To replace all those things, we'd make it with stevia and monk fruit and those kinds of things. And as time goes on, for a lot of us, we don't need that stuff anymore. Maybe once in a while, maybe at Thanksgiving or other holidays, or maybe you're having a football party and you want to serve something. But outside of that, or you have kids and grandkids who still expect those kinds of things. But for most of us, all those needs go away. But you're right. Allulose, good sweetener, monk fruit, stevia, some others.
All right, now let's pivot into Ozempic, semaglutide, these drugs that are exploding right now in the conventional realm to help with weight loss.
Tragic, Jesse. Horrible. The FDA should never have approved those awful class of drugs. So let's say your wife pays $12,000 for a year's worth of Wegovy. She endures all the side effects. Hopefully, doesn't die of a bowel obstruction or something. But she loses 40 pounds. Of the 40 pounds lost, 10 pounds is muscle, 30 pounds is fat. Now, 10 pounds of muscle is a lot. Imagine 10 pounds of ground beef on your kitchen table. It's a lot of muscle to lose. So she stops the drug after a year because few people can afford that forever. She regains 32 to 34 pounds, almost nearly all fat, not the muscle. She's now more at risk for diabetes, heart disease, dementia, breast cancer than she was at the start. Because the pivotal thing here is the loss of muscle. So in the clinical studies, a couple dozen of them, between up to 50% of the weight lost is muscle. And we know with good evidence, when you lose muscle, your metabolic rate plummets. So for instance, the so-called Biggest Loser study, they took a bunch of people who are graduates of the 8th season, like Danny Cahill. I talked to him. He started at 430 pounds. Jesse, he lost 239 pounds in 7 months. I mean, wow! By consuming 800 calories per day, which is torture, and exerting about 8,000 calories. And he does it. At the end of the show, he looked great. Good looking guy, looked great, right? He leaves the show, continues 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, exercise, strength, resistance, and aerobic. And a low calorie diet regains the weight. NIH researchers studied those people who did this. All except one regained all the weight because of the loss of muscle. They measured their metabolic rate. It dropped by 27%. And the study ended after 6 years, and their metabolic rate was still low at 6 years. So it goes on for a long, long time. In other words, whenever you lose muscle, you guarantee that metabolic rate will drop, the rate at which you burn calories, and you will regain the weight. So GLP-1 agonists are just another spin on calorie reduction. We could call it GLP-1 agonist. We could call it move more, eat less. we could call it lap band or gastric bypass that shrinks stomach volume. They're all variations on the same theme, reducing calorie intake. And we know with good evidence, when you reduce calorie intake, you lose muscle, which in turn guarantees a drop in metabolic rate and weight regain. Now, one thing I didn't mention to you was we did that little clinical trial for the skin, and we did show an increase in dermal thickness. Ladies were happy. They lost their wrinkles, right, in 3 months. But they also lost a ton of abdominal fat, as much as 8.5 inches off their waist. And now, here's the crazy thing. These ladies lost all this abdominal fat, but didn't lose weight. Well, how in the world can you lose tons of abdominal fat, not lose weight? Well, consistent with the animal evidence and what's going on around me with thousands of people, increased muscle. So for instance, me personally, in my 60s, I hate going to the gym. I don't know about you, I hate going to the gym. So I go 15 minutes once a week. And when I did this, I gained 13 pounds of muscle and my strength increased by 50%. That's what we're seeing. People are regaining muscle. So the GLP agonist world reduces calorie intake because it makes you not interested in eating. You lose muscle, reduce BMR, metabolic rate, regain the weight, and you're less healthy than you were. I think we stumble on a way through a skin trial to preserve or increase muscle, specifically target abdominal fat. And so this is a kind of a new conversation I've been having, that ways to get control. So I tell people, don't worry about weight loss. Let's think of it instead as shape and body composition. Ladies say, I don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Don't worry, you won't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. What we're trying to do is restoring the level of musculature you had in your 20s. That's what's happening. And of course, this is Ozempic face phenomenon. You lose your weight on the GLP-1 agonist and you look like you're 10, 20 years older because you lost subcutaneous fat, you lost muscle. We're seeing the opposite. We're seeing preservation of muscle, reduction of wrinkles, and people look 10 to 20 years younger. That's what we're seeing.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
No, there's nothing else that tracks with LDL cholesterol because it's not a real number. It's a fictitious number. It's obtained by something called the Friedewald calculation. The LDL cholesterol reducing franchise, statin drugs, PCSK9 drugs, all that stuff pay huge